Okay, so if you did not notice, on Slack, the teams for the hackathon have been published, along with the team leads or co-team leads. Those are colored in orange. So the way it's going to work is I'm going to give you some sample code that solves a similar but significantly less complex problem than you're going to be asked to do during the hackathon. And then each team at the hackathon would have to review the current code to understand what it's doing, to kind of give themselves a crash course on so you've already done the crash course, the boot camp video and stuff like that from the other night, so you have an idea of how TensorFlow works. Now I'm going to give you a practical example of TensorFlow working on a specific data set. Then I'm going to give you a challenge to work on during the hackathon, and every team will work on the same challenge. Because at the end, we're going to pit those models against each other for which one solves the problem the best. Okay, so every team will be given input, a set of inputs to test their model. And then they'll provide the outputs, and the team that gets the highest percentage of them right wins. And all the other teams run laps. Okay. Depending on which place you get in, there'll be powers of 4 laps. Okay, so we'll start with 10 to the 4th power, and these are laps around Mech 1.
Are they completed as a team?
The laps?
Like the number of laps that share between each person.
Well, not like baton style, but like as a group. So you can only move as fast as your slowest runner.
Oh, that makes sense.
So we can use wheelbarrow.
Am I going to be in a group? No. Well, I'm like tech support for groups.
You should be the leader of our group.
I've done that before when we didn't have very good turnout, and then I started offering this horrific penalty assignment, and we have much better turnout now. Everybody check out that penalty assignment?
Yeah.
Not fun.
It's not fun. It should have been like read the entire Bible and write a 700-page paper. Transcribe the Bible.
In code, in Python.
Is there a question over here? Oh, I saw a hand. Okay. All right. So, any questions about the hackathon other than the mysterious thing I've given you? Go ahead.
Are you gonna get back? Tell me what my specific.
Yeah. I'll reply to you. I already considered it. I decided just to triple the length, actually.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So
Great.
That sounds perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Let's see. This is us, right? Yes, I'm actually really excited about the challenge for the hackathon. It's solving a real computer science problem. I'm just trying to cut down my the solution I'm going to give you to model it off of to below 10,000 lines of code.
Exciting.
Sounds definitely interesting. Will we get to see the challenge before you look at it? Or?
I think maybe not. Yeah. So as I would suggest, maybe teams get together and make sure everybody has TensorFlow installed in their machine and things like that. Make sure you've gone through the video so everybody kind of has the basic gist of how TensorFlow works. And then I'll be giving you a working Python program with any data sets you would need to run it that solves something that is not the problem you're being asked to solve. But a shadow, significantly easier problem that relates to it enough that you should be able to make the connection. Okay, and then the challenge will be solve this historically. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to use machine learning to solve a known complex problem in computer science. So this is something that there are special algorithms that have been invented to determine if something is probably one of these, because the amount of effort it takes to determine it for very, 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 very large values would take too long. So we're going to do that with a neural network. And I don't even know if it's going to work.
That's part of the fun.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, well, it'll work somewhat. I just don't know how good it will ultimately be able to synthesize it. It's just a great idea to try to do it. That's a perfect example of something a neural network could be applied to. Yeah, it's so exciting.
I'm going to solve computer science problem.
Like legitimately. Okay, so let me run this real quick and see where we. So the question is, right now, are we more excited or scared about the hackathon?
I thought it was interesting when I took a look yesterday, just because the code is just really stuck together. Like,
What I should do is when I release the Python code, I should encrypt the Python code using ROT13. Do you know what ROT13 is?
Only not yet.
Oh man, we should do ROT13 in here.
Right now? Today?
Yeah, today.
Okay.
We'll just write an encryption algorithm today.
Okay.
I'm not kidding.
I'm
We're gonna-
I'm really curious.
We're gonna write ROT13.
Show me.
All right. So here, let me just shut up. I'm the only one who can go off topic and babble. All right. So let's review what we did here. So I think the homework was to bring this up to date, right? So right now we want these these different buttons click. So if I hit LOL, it sets this guy. If I hit Woot, it sets this guy. I hit Blaine, it sets this guy. So you were supposed to just mimic this, proving that you had all the moving pieces working and stuff like that, right? And that one okay for everybody? Ish, perfect, trivial, easy.
Did you so like when you loaded yours, you had like not that much stuff on you, but I mean I opened one and it just had tons of random code. Like did you just erase that? Or did you have it?
Tons of random code where? What do you mean?
Yeah, like code to start with.
This?
Were you looking at the Gradle or were you looking?
I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean you have to make sure you go to the right place in here. So I mean it's under app Java, this folder, then main activity. So that's the code I've written. I mean, if you start going into things that were like generated by Android Studio,
Yeah.
you're going to get some pretty scary stuff that we didn't write. Go ahead.
So mine, like, I finally got the emulator to come up, but then I like tried to push the buttons, and it would crack. So why was that?
So you would hit play, and then the app would try to start up and would crash immediately?
Not until I pushed the button.
Okay, so chances are that so I'm certain it has something to do with your code. So whether you did the sum button press thing, so it's calling one of these functions. So chances are if you have them all set to call sum button was pressed, did you do it that way or did you do the individual buttons?
I have no idea.
All right, well, if you did it with a single function or the individual buttons, doesn't matter. But if it's all three buttons, they're all breaking, and they're all calling the same function, your problem is going to be in the code here. So maybe you're not retrieving, you didn't name your text view app name TV and you still try to grab something called app name TV, something like that, but it's going to be something in here that you have a syntax error or a logic error. All right. So that's definitely going to be code related. Something with the code is broken. That code that you wrote, not something with the emulator. So that's probably a good thing that it's going to be fixable through a line of code as opposed to some other weird thing going on. Okay, so what I'm going to show you today then is how do we read stuff in from a edit text. So maybe we have an edit text where we can type something into the program, and then we hit a button, that button does something. And what we're going to have that button do is we're going to have it do ROT13. We'll learn about ROT13. All right, so I'm going to go into my designer thingy majiggy here. All right, so I'm going to start cutting out stuff from my interface here. I'm going to add and edit text and take some buttons away. So is everybody cool with the current state of things? I can start dumping this. All right, so I'm gonna just get rid of this horizontal linear layout here. Get rid of my buttons. I'll get rid of this bottom text view as well. Actually, I'll use that bottom text view as my output. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my palette up here, go to text, and I'm going to put a, notice we have all these different types of text things. So all these things that have little underlines under them, these are inputs for being able to put something into your program. Now, they're all actually based off of the same generic type of input box, but then you can go in and choose what keyboard comes up. But if for convenience purposes, you can choose one of their pre-made ones and it will give you the appropriate keyboard for that text. So for instance, if you put in the one for assigned number, it'll only give you a keyboard that allows you to type in numbers, positive and negative. Okay, you won't be able to put in like question marks and letters and stuff like that. All right, so to kind of make it so that your code is less breakable, something like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to just use a plain text because we're going to want to put in letters, and we're going to assume that the person's input is going to be some letter of the alphabet. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drop a plain text one in here, and I'm going to put it in, underneath my first app and above that other text view. All right, so I have this box that just showed up in there that currently says name in it. All right, and I'm going to change this guy's ID. So I have that edit text selected. I'm going to change it to input ET for input edit text. All right, and just because I like it, I'm going to go to gravity for this guy, and I'm going to center it horizontally so my text in there is going to be centered. All right, now so right now there's some text already in this box that just says name. We're going to end up taking that out, but before we take that out, there's this attribute up here called hint. This allows you to kind of display in that box what kind of value should go in that box, but it's not something you have to delete. So we're going to say enter a letter in the hint field there. Now you don't see anything in here yet, but once I remove the text that's there, notice it says enter a letter. All right, so this is giving us a hint. So when we click on this, you're not going to have to backspace out, enter a letter. Just kind of gives us an idea of what you should type, what kind of thing you should type in there. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to read this letter in. Okay, so again, we're going to be working with MVC here. So I'm going to need to go ahead and give myself access to this edit text in my code. And I'm going to put a button in here to trigger this. So let me go ahead and drop a button in. Just put it underneath the edit text. So there's my button. And we'll just have the button say go. Okay, so just put go on the button. So the idea here is that when we click this button, we want it to read from this edit text, and we're going to have it just put whatever it read into this text view down here, proving that it can read something in and write something back out. All right, we've already written stuff out before. Now we need to make sure that this text view down here has a name, so we can reference it. Right now it's a extremely descriptive name of text view 8. I'm going to change that to output TV. So this is going to be our output text view. All right, and I'll go ahead and set the gravity of that guy to center horizontally too, just so everything's kind of centered. And we'll also make the text size bigger. Now there's a 18, something like that. All right, and I'm just going to put like a placeholder here, so I'll just put an A as a, that's the kind of value that will show up in there. Okay, long term when we do the ROT13 thing. All right, so now I want to give myself access to this edit text so I can read something in, and I want to give myself access to this text view so I can write something out. And then I want to write a function that this go button will call when it gets clicked. All right, so this is going to put all of our little tools together that we've been learning the last couple of classes. So I'll go into main activity. I'm going to I'm just going to dump all these functions that we have down here. Remember, they're already up on GitHub, so you can go back and GitHub will save every version of the file, so you can go and look at old code on there. All right, so I'm going to write a function called public void go button pressed. And this guy will take a view v as a parameter. All right, so the idea here would be is that when I click that go button, it's going to call this guy. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself access to that edit text here. And then I'm going to read in whatever's in that edit text. I'm also going to give myself access to the output text view. And then whatever I read in, I'm going to write out to the output text view. All right, so I'm going to say edit text input et is equal to the edit text version of this dot find view by ID r dot id dot input et. All right, so that will give me a edit text object that is connected to the actual widget that's on our screen. Similarly, I'm going to create a text view called output TV, and this guy will be the text view version of this dot find view by ID r dot id dot output TV. Go ahead.
So is that input ET and output TV? Is that what you ended up naming?
This is what I named them over here. So that's what I named them out in the XML. Okay. I just happen to write variable names that match that because it makes sense. But I could have called this guy cat if I wanted to. Just that would no longer really make a lot of sense what that edit text is. Okay, so I made the names match. Okay, so this will allow me to read something in. This will allow me to read something out or to write something out. So I'll go ahead and read it into a string. So I'll say string input. You don't have to put it into a string, but I'll just do it in separate steps. So I'll say string input is equal to input et dot get text dot toString. So I'm asking my edit text to give me the text that he currently has inside of him. Now, technically, that text is something called of type editable, which I'm not going to talk about right now, but just know that if you actually want the string version of it, you just have to say toString. That will get you the actual string that you typed into that text box. Okay?
For example, if you want to turn something into an integer, do you just say to integer?
No.
Oh, just kidding.
Yeah, once we have it as a string, it'll come in. But now, if you want to turn the string into an int, you can do things like integer.parseInt on that string, or write code like we've done before. This is a normal Java string, nothing special about it.
Okay, I'm just curious, like when you write a code, like I know that you use it a lot, so then you know what to, functions to you. So then is there any like trick that like can give me like a hint when I'm finding like a functions that I
yeah, I mean, part of it's going to be, learning the stuff just by using it. So I'm showing you kind of popular things, but if you just do Android edit text, do a search for that, this will bring up the edit text documentation, presumably if the internet's working. So here's edit text for Android developers. So here is the documentation for that edit text class. You scroll through here. Here's the public methods. One of them is called getText. This returns the text that a text view is displaying as something called an editable. You can then click that editable thing. It'll take you into what this guy is. If you scroll down through here, you see that things that are editables have a, actually it inherits some other things from like char sequence and stuff like that. So if I just hit the down here, this guy will have a toString in it. Returns a string containing the characters in the sequence in the same order as the sequence. So this is how you get the string. So there's a lot of documentation, obviously. So, I mean, you can go through and hunt for stuff. So I'm kind of showing you highlights as we go through there. And then once you have the highlights, when you start writing more complex applications, you can kind of say, I need to do this. I wonder if there's something out there that will allow me to do it. But usually it's when you're doing Android stuff, I mean, if you kind of think about from just normal Java stuff or even normal Python stuff, there's been a lot of situations where I've given you assignments that had you do something, quote, the hard way, and then I showed you something built into the language that did it. So in many cases, the only real things you're going to need is how do you read something in from some input? How do you write something out to something? So we already kind of have those skills. Once you have them in code and it's a string or something, now it's just normal Java. If you want to convert that to a number and you don't know about integer.parseInt, you can just write your own function that will take a string representation of a number and turn it into an int. It's not a friendly function to write, but it's not a hard function to write. Okay. So I will go ahead and this line right here will ask my edit text to get his text and then ask that text to produce me the string version of itself because it stores that text in this character sequence thing. All right, so now I'll have a string and I am storing that string inside of a variable called input of type string. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to then write that string out. So I'll say output tv dot set text to input. So I'm going to write whatever I read in to my text view. Make sense? All right, so now I need to go hook my button up to make sure it calls this go button pressed. So I'll click on my button. I'll go to on click, hit the drop down. There's my go button pressed right there. Click on that. Okay, so now I have an edit text that's named input ET, which I'm connecting up in code. I'm finding it in code. I have a text view called output TV, which I'm connecting up in code. I have a button that when it's clicked is calling go button pressed. That's a function in code. So when I click this button, that function gets called. What does that function do? It grabs my edit text, it grabs my output text view, it reads in from my edit text, and it writes whatever I read in out to the output text view. Make sense? That's our whole logic flow right now. So excited. It's Thanksgiving dinner in the cafeteria today. So after class, I'm going to go gut load.
You should excite about tomorrow. Yeah.
Well, food fair could be something I might show up to tomorrow. Is there good food? Just tortillas again.
There's going to be 30 countries food.
Okay. But how many of them are going to have tortillas? What time does it start? What time is this food
4
fair?
to 6.
4 to 6 p.m.? So I should come in for dinner is what you're saying?
Yeah.
But I might be still working on your incredibly impossible hackathon assignment.
I can bring food to your room.
Like, well, I'm not going to be here. I'll be at my house. So you're going to deliver it to my house?
Sure.
All right. You got to take pictures of everything so I can place my order. She didn't think I was going to take her up on that. Yes, I will. All right. So if I type in a G here, for example, and then I hit go, it'll read in that G and output it to that text view. Make sense? So I'm reading in and I'm writing back out, proving I can get input to my program. All right. So any questions about what I just did? Those are kind of go-to moves for doing Android stuff. All right, so if you kind of think about what we're really trying to accomplish here, even though we're introducing Android Studio as a new tool and introducing some skills that you can use to write apps and sell them on the app stores and things like that, at the end of the day, we're just creating a new environment in which we can use our Java skills, right? I mean, we're not going to write these super crazy fancy apps. We're going to have most of our apps are going to have a new way of getting input into your program. Then you're going to do something to it. Then you're going to output it. So instead of it being at the console where you ask them for some input, they type it in and press enter, it reads it in, then you do something to it, and then do a system.println. Instead of that, we're writing it out to a text view or something, right? So we're not really doing something drastically different than we were doing before. We're just doing it inside of another environment to kind of keep you feeling uncomfortable when you're coding, hopefully to keep showing you that the code is the same. All right. So now I want to introduce something called ROT13. All right. So I'm going to just create a function here. Public string ROT13. Actually, that's not going to be a string. It's going to be a char. It's going to take a char C as a parameter. All right. So first of all, so I'm going to put above this. This is an encryption, and here I'll elevate this on the screen so it's a little higher up for some of you. Encryption algorithm. All right. What's encryption?
Hidden stuff.
Okay, so encryption is like a way of scrambling up stuff to make it not readable. Mathy, incredibly impossible stuff. Seems way harder than we should be doing in 250, especially in one class period, right? So first of all, it has kind of an intimidating name, right? ROT13. Does that kind of feel intimidating for some reason? Kind of sounds like garbage, kind of rotten stuff, has a 13 after it. Why a 13? You know, just like stuff like that, right? It's just something's going on, right? So now, sometimes instead of encryption, this guy is called a cipher. Is that another intimidating word? Wasn't some guy in the Matrix movies named Cipher? You saw the Matrix movies, didn't you?
Some parts.
Yeah, he was in the first one. Oh, computer science people, you have to watch the Matrix movies.
I'm waiting on the part thing to happen.
No, Cipher was the hacker guy that turned on him.
Ah, that guy.
Yeah.
I haven't watched that.
Well, you know he's a hacker guy, and his nickname is Cipher. Must be complex and scary,
Oh, yeah.
right? Okay. Now, ROT13 had a historical name called the Caesar Cipher. All right. I think I spelled Caesar right. All right. So this is called the Caesar Cipher. Are we getting less scary yet?
I don't know. It's Caesar. He got stabbed a lot.
All right. So we've heard of Caesar before. Guy ran Roman Empire, right? That dude. Well, he used to send messages, as leaders do, right? And he didn't want these messages to be publicly readable. Just like today, right? You know, you figure that stuff's getting sent from the White House to a congressman or something like that. It's probably secured in some way, right? You know, unless you get all the news about public email servers and stuff like that, and just all this, classified stuff was just being sent in emails. But generally speaking, we view government as being very cloak and daggery. So chances are, if they're sending important information, it's going to be encrypted in some way, so it's not easy to read. All right, so Caesar wanted to have his messages encrypted. Okay, so he had this encryption. He came up. I don't know if he came up with it or one of his minions came up with it, but somebody came up with this this encryption algorithm called ROT13, or the Caesar Cipher. Okay, and ROT13 stands for rotate 13. That's what the ROT stands for, is rotate. All right. Now,
Is there a reason for number 13? Or is it
there is a reason. There's a very good reason, actually. What I'm about to tell to you. So we'll call string alpha. I'm going to put the whole alphabet in here. So we'll say right, did I get it right? A, B, C, D, F, G, H. Okay, yep. So that's our alphabet. Now remind me, how many characters are in the English alphabet? 26 of them. What's 13?
Exactly half.
Half of 26? All right, so the idea of the ROT13 is if you have an A, for example, we're going to turn that into, we're going to take 13 steps forward. So an A becomes a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Becomes an N. Okay, so an A becomes an N. Now, let's say we have something like a Q. A Q, we take 13 steps forward. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10, 11, 12, 13. We wrap around. So a Q would become a D. Make sense? So what we do is we take each character in a string and we shift it, we rotate it forward 13 characters in the alphabet, wrapping around the end of the alphabet to the beginning if we run out of characters, giving us something it maps to. Make sense? That doesn't seem so bad, does it? We just did it by hand. So now we got to write the computer program that does it. How would we go about doing that? So we have a method here that's going to take a char as a parameter. All right. And we can assume, for this argument, since I made my alphabet all uppercase letters, we can assume this is an uppercase character. All right. If you want to guarantee it's an uppercase character, we can say C is equal to character dot to uppercase. What kind of animal is that guy right there? So field method constructor.
It's method.
Method. How do you know it's a method? Parentheses. Okay. Is it a class method or instance method? Class method. How do you know?
It's calling character.
Okay. How do you know this is the name of a class? How do you know this is probably the name of a class? Capital letter. So this starts with a capital letter. So this is probably the name of a class. So since that's the name of a class and we're using it to call this method must be a class method. Therefore, if I were to go and look for that guy being defined in the documentation, so I should find what in front of it. Yep. So Java character class. Just do a search for that there. Here's the character class in Java. We'll scroll down to the to uppercase. Oh, it's going so well.
There's two lowercase.
Yeah, same thing. Here's to uppercase. Takes a char C as a parameter, and notice it's static. See how these things are lining up? So even if you've never used this before, if you were to say, oh, I wonder if there's something for doing something with characters in Java, you found the character class, you scroll down and say, oh, it might be helpful to convert a character to uppercase. You see, oh, it's a static method. How do I call that guy? Using the name of the class in which it was defined. Character dot to uppercase. And I have to provide this guy with a char because since it's a class method, it doesn't know about any instance fields. So I have to provide it the char I want it to operate on. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. All right. So you're starting to see how all these skills are kind of important. These aren't just like Lippmann's making me do this for my health thing. Okay. If you want to be able to leverage programming languages, you need to be able to read the documentation because I promise you, you're not going to memorize every language. I think I've said before, I've been programming in all these languages for a long time, and I don't know most of them in terms of all the features of the language. Those core things I've used a lot, so they're right there, in my memory, but sometimes I have to go look something up. You want to have that skill where you can learn how to read it really quickly. Okay? All right, so you can either assume this is an uppercase character or we'll just force the issue. Like, yeah, you pass me some sort of char, I'll convert it to uppercase. Okay, in this case, we are presuming this is going to be some kind of letter. Although I think if you call to uppercase on like a question mark, it just returns the question mark. I don't think it's an error, but we're going to make an assumption here that they've given us a letter of the alphabet, and we'll go ahead and force it to uppercase just because, but you can even assume it's an uppercase letter. Okay? So now we need to return a char that is this letter shifted forward 13 spaces in the alphabet, wrapping it around the alphabet. How could I write that? Does that sound difficult?
Question. Can we do another string that like copy the 13 letters up and then we just match the position?
Okay, well tell me what you want to do.
I don't really know, just an idea.
Okay, well so just tell me your idea again. You want to create another string.
So if we create another one and then we have like 13 letters of A and then we just you know, because it's 13 and 14, so that if B move up, the other letters move up too. So then we just copy that, paste for like the first 13, and then copy the other one, paste for the last 13. So we have another string. So then we just match that with the position of the string. You know what I'm saying? Or-
Okay, so you want to create another string that is the alphabet shifted forward 13. Okay, I don't hate that. I mean, it's a little bit. It's kind of, you know. So she wants to do something like this. She wants to say string map. Let's see.
Start with, would you say N?
N, right? So it would be this guy followed by this guy.
Probably.
So an N would become an A Q would become, I'll just shift it over here. Oh my gosh, it's terrible. A Q would become a D, is that right? So this is 1, 2, I hate this mouse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Q is a D. Yeah, I think this would work. All right. So let's assume we start with that. What value is in C? What kind of value is in C?
Char.
A char. Specifically, we're assuming it's a char that could be found in here.
Yeah.
Okay, so where is that char inside of there? I mean, you've told me if I have an N, that becomes an A. If I have a Q, that becomes a D. Okay, but so if C is equal to a Q, I need to find the position of Q in this string. So I can then go and look up the position of D in this string. Well, the same position in this string and get the D. So how do I find out where the position of C is inside the string alpha? Go ahead.
Char use for loop parse through and check the individual.
Okay, so you want to write some code. So maybe we put a little, so find position of C in alpha. Okay, so maybe we say int pos is equal to -1. We'll say for int I is equal to 0. I is less than alpha dot length I plus plus. If alpha dot char at I is equivalent to C, then pos is equal to I.
Yeah.
Then how do I get out of this loop?
And break.
Just
Break.
Yeah.
So break gets me out of the closest loop, so that'll jump me right here. So when I get to here, pos should hold the position of C in alpha. All right. So now pos should hold the position of C in alpha. Okay. Now what do I do with that?
and then you just put the print the map. I mean, print the position at print the I position.
Why am I printing?
You said you want to see the character, isn't it? No.
Same position from alpha has to be the same position as map.
This guy returns a value, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, doesn't print it, it returns it. I'd say doesn't print it, but returns it, Luke, but apparently his alarm 40 is still blaring.
Oh. What is he doing? He stays in one too.
All right, so now I have the pause, and what were you saying we need to do?
Match the position from alpha to the position in map.
Okay, so I have the position inside of a variable called pause. So how do I get that character from map?
A map at position I pause.
Okay, so how do I say map at position pause? You're right. That's what I want to say. How do I say that?
Is it map.char at pause?
Okay. Map.char at pause. like that, and then I want to return it, she pointed out. All right, so I'm going to take that value and I'm going to return that value.
Oh, you can return like that?
Sure. What does this boil down to? This goes down to resolving variables, right? You look at that, it looks all crazy, like, oh, I have a variable. It's calling a char@, method that's passing in another variable, but ultimately that boils down to what? A single char. And what does this method return? A single char. So this gives me the character that lives at position pause inside of a string called map. So it'll give me one of these characters. That makes sense? All right. So let's test it. So now instead of setting the text to input, we'll set the text to this dot rot13 of input. Okay, now input came in as a string, right?
Yeah.
But I need to pass this guy as a char. Now we're presuming they're entering in a single character, right? So how do I get the single character that lives inside of input?
Can we just put the string in our input? Just to play it as a string.
Well, you want to say this is a string instead? I read in my input as a string. It's coming in as a string. It's going to come in as a string. I just happen to know it's a string with only one character in it. How do I get that single char from the string? Don't overthink it. How do I get any char from a string? Char@. Where's the location of the first char in a string?
0.
0. So I'll pass this guy input dot char@0. Won't that give me the first character in the string input? Or in our case, the only character in the string input? So whatever input is, I'm going to extract the very first character, presumably in our case, the only character, since we're only entering in a single character because we've said that's what we're going to do. I'm passing that character to my rot13 function. What does the rot13 function do? It maps it and ultimately returns the result, and that's what I'm going to put into my code here. Go ahead.
I was going to say I have another idea about what we can do now.
Okay, so let's test it first because we're definitely going to do it another way. So we'll implement yours next. Okay, I don't hate this idea, but it's verbose. This is a verb, but that's okay. If it works, doesn't matter if it's verbose. You'd rather have a long correct solution than a really short incorrect solution, right? So let's go and test this. All right, so if I put in an A and then I hit go, what should it map to?
And
An N, row. Let's look at logcat. It's going to show us our error here.
Oh, you're missing. Are you missing like a both passing?
Let's see where it.
Change the button to the new function.
We had already tested the button. I think it's reading in from the button just fine. Here, I'm going to switch this to just error. So half of these are Android errors. Oh, cannot execute method for Android on click. I actually think maybe this wasn't a problem. Just make sure it's still set to that. I think it was just, yeah, it's still set for go button press. I'm just going to run it again. I think it was a hiccup. So I'll put in an A. We'll hit go. Well, not a hiccup. Oh, rot13 returns a char, right? But if I'm going to set the text, I have to set the text to a string. I'll turn the char that's returned by rot13 into a string by concatenating it onto the empty string. Okay, the actual answer there is a little bit deeper though, because there's two versions of set text. One version is a string. The other version is an int, where we can reference a ID of something in this strings.xml file that we haven't used yet. Well, technically chars are actually numeric types. Make sense? So it's trying to look up, whatever character I return there, it's taking the numeric value of it and trying to look it up in my strings XML and not finding a connection to, some unique ID for that guy. That's why it's crashing. Now I'm turning it into a string, so it will just put that string in there. Type our A, we'll hit go, we get our N. We hit Q, what do we say that should be, a D? There's our D, so on and so forth. All right, so we are correctly mapping to rot13. All right, so how's your alternate approach?
So pretty much, if you look up the position of the letter you're given, so look up the position of C, and then you find your new position by, so add the position of C, add 13, and then if you mod 26, it'll give you a number, and then look up the new position in the same, so then you don't need map, you only use alpha.
All right, so we're going to, I'll just write a second version of this guy. Rot13_2. All right, so she wants to get rid of map. She wants to find the position. And then she wants to return alpha at position pause mod 26. So if I divide pause by 26, what are my possible results? What is my mod is remainder, right? So if I divide anything by 26, my possible results are for remainder is what?
1 through 3 or 0 through 13.
More? If I divide anything by 26, my possible remainders are what? Almost. Not 26. If I had something that was something divided by 26, if I had a remainder of 26, that means it went in an extra time, right? 0 to 25. 0 to 25. So anything mod something will be 0 to that something minus 1. That's the range of values that live in there. All right. So, for example, we use this Q, right? So this Q lived at what position? This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, so 16 plus 13 is what?
27.
29. 29, right? All right, so 29 mod 26. How many times does 26 go into 29? One time with remainder 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. There's my D. So that works? So let's test that version. So we're going to call rot13_2 here. So an A will become an N. Oh, did I not return it? I might not have returned it. Oh, I return it. Alpha.char at pause divided by 26.
You have to add 13.
Oh, yeah, I do. It is mapping. It's just mapping to itself. Yeah, we do have to add 13 to pause, right? We did it in our example. We just didn't write the code to match it. So this is pause plus 13 mod 26. And now our A will become an N. And our Q will become a D. And it'll work for all of them. All right. Anybody else have an approach that we can further streamline this guy a bit? Go ahead.
You could use index of.
Oh, yeah, index of would have been nice. Okay, so let's go in here. We'll create a version 3 of this guy. All right, how do you want to use index of?
Well, you just find the index of C, and then you can just do the same thing.
Okay, so you're replacing all of this stuff, right? Okay, so we're going to set pause equal to what?
Index of char C.
So you want to see in there like that? Who's index of? Index of is a instance method of what class?
String or alpha dot.
Yeah, alpha of. Yeah, so alpha dot index of C.
I think the I is all that.
Yeah, I is not, O is. All right, so alpha dot index of C will return the first position in alpha where it finds a C. So this code right here does the same thing as our loop did up here. Make sense? Now, is the loop a huge problem? No, but we didn't know about it. We didn't remember index of. It didn't occur to us when we were writing it. But writing index of certainly made this shorter, right? All right, so this guy will also work, right? So here we'll, just for the completeness, we'll test this. I'm going to ask you for another solution. We're going to keep going until we get a one-line solution.
Are you serious?
I mean, technically,
I've already used one last.
So there's my A, becomes an N. There's my Q, becomes a D. That proves our wraparound, right? Go ahead.
I have one.
Okay.
So on the first two, we need to introduce the variable position.
Yep.
To get position. Is it relevant that you put -1, or did you just have to set it to something?
I just set it to something. I mean, I could have, since I know it's in there somewhere, I could have set it to 0
Okay.
because I know that in here, it's going to change.
Okay.
But you do need to set it to something because, well, actually, do you want to take a stab at why I definitely need to set it to something?
Well,
because if it doesn't,
I don't know.
Okay, so I'll set it to nothing there.
Okay.
And notice it doesn't, it's not happy about something down here, right? It's got the little red squiggly under pause.
Do you have to, like, to define a variable?
oh,
No, you don't have to. You can define it. This is perfectly legal, that line right there.
it's because this is the position, like, this is an expert for this thing.
Yeah, you're,
Oh, I know.
okay, go ahead.
Well, up at the top it says int. Oh no, wait. But you can do that. Sure.
Let's go with him. You're going down a good path. It's actually a double layered thing. You already given me the first answer, but there's even a bigger reason. So go ahead and reset what you said.
Right now, without looking at the for statement, it's looking for to return your the position, which is currently nothing. There's nothing assigned to it. Nothing will be assigned to it until it goes through the for loop and the if statement. But if it goes through the for loop and the if statement.
Okay, so the only place pause ever gets a value is inside this if statement, right? Are we guaranteed to ever get into that if statement? We know, because we know the data that we're working with, that we'll get into that if statement. But from Java's perspective, it has no way of guaranteeing that's going to happen, right? Furthermore, are we even guaranteed to get into this for loop? Why not?
Oh,
What kind of loops are for loops? Connect a couple other dots. We have 3 kinds of loops, right? We have for loops, while loops, do while loops.
yeah.
For loops and while loops are both what kind of loops?
Checks conditional first.
Pre-check loops.
Yeah.
Whereas a do while loop is a post-check loop. So in a for loop or a while loop, there is no guarantee we will ever get into this code. Okay, and what I mean by that is I could even just say pause is equal to I in here like that. And notice it still has a problem with it. Because there is not a guarantee we will even get to that line. So we kind of have 2 walls we have to jump here, right? You got to get into this for loop first to even have a chance. Then we have to get into this if statement for it to ever actually get a value. Now, again, we know because we are smart, we're people, and we know the nature of the data we're working with, that we know we will get into the for loop and we will also get into the if statement. We know both of those things to be true. Okay, so we don't have to worry about, I mean, we can set this guy equal to, whatever value we want, because we know it will be changed inside of our loop and inside of that if statement. All right, but in order for Java to be happy that this guy will have a value when we get to it, so if I take this thing out, the error message would be something along the lines of pause may not have been initialized. Variable pause might not have been initialized. See, I even memorize all the error messages. And that's kind of my point. This actually, that kind of thing, where this was an easy error message to know. But the point is that, I've said many times, don't copy and paste too much stuff, type everything. Over time, when you put in these reps, for those of you who play a sport or something like that, you do all sorts of moves now, second nature, without even thinking about it, because you practiced it for so long. But when you first started with that sport, or if you play a video game or something like that, everything was new. You had to really think about what you were doing and stuff like that. So over the years, you put in enough reps, you see enough errors, you see all these things, you start knowing kind of like, oh, this is where I screwed up and this is what he's going to yell at me about. Okay, because how many times have I seen the error in my lifetime that said you might not have initialized this variable? Okay, a couple times. I've seen that a couple of times. I don't see it very often now unless I purposely do it. But when I first started programming, I bet you I saw it pretty often because I wasn't in the habit of initializing variables. Sometimes I didn't understand that not getting into a for loop wasn't a guaranteed thing to happen, that kind of stuff. All right, so that's why we set it to something. All right, so did we actually test our guy down there? I don't remember. I think we did. It works, so let's assume we tested it. All right, so now I need a ROT 13 version 4. Our goal is to get this to be a single line. Now we could already squeeze this down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I can actually just not use a variable here, so I can take that guy and replace pause with that.
We can have to define what alpha is now.
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Now I am also saying, well, actually, you could still do it in one line. Just to clear things up here, let's assume we're already passing in an uppercase letter. You still could do it in one line, but it doesn't necessarily show what I want you to see. So we'll just assume it's an uppercase letter. Okay, so now we have it down to 2 lines. Okay, she's like, well, don't you have to write alpha? That's an excellent question. What do you think? Go ahead.
Shouldn't we be able to use the Unicode value along with mod 26 to locate the correct, I don't know.
Yeah, tell me about these Unicode value things.
Yeah, so they map to unsigned whole numbers.
Okay.
Which, well, yeah.
Okay, so if we're dealing with uppercase letters, okay, okay, so you're thinking, okay, well, what's an A? That's what you're thinking about, right?
Yeah,
what's an A? So why don't we go ahead and look at that real quick? So we're going to say that let me do it. So I'm going to go to my go button, and rather than setting the output TV equal to my ROT13, I want to set it equal to the Unicode value for A, for example. So output TV dot set text to the empty string concatenated with, how do I get the Unicode value of the char A? Chars are actually stored as what? What kind of value is actually a char?
Number.
Yeah, it's an unsigned 16-bit int, right? But now when we use a char, because Java is strongly typed, Java looks at it and says, this is a char. I'm going to go ahead and do that conversion for you. I'll show you that A, or I'll show you that Z, whatever it is. Okay, but now we're like, I kind of want the number. I'd like to see the number. How do I force Java to treat this char like an integer? Cast it to an int. Just put a little int in front of it, and then we'll say input.char at 0. So this guy right here will be the one character that's in our string. Then I'm saying give me the integer version of that character and concatenate that onto the empty string. So this should show us the Unicode value for uppercase A. If I type in an A there, 65. A C is 67. So that means an A plus 2 is a C.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So how do I make sure I keep it in my cycle?
Well, we start at 65 then, so we do 65 plus our position plus 13 mod 26.
Okay. Like what? So we're going to write our one-liner here. So it's going to be our ROT13 version 4. So go ahead and dump alpha. And what are we going to return? We're going to return the char version of something. Okay, and it's going to be the char version of what? Our first number is 65 plus let me just retype this. 65 plus the int version of C. I'm going to put that in parentheses, okay, plus 13 mod 26. So this guy right here is going to give me, well, I got an extra set here. So this guy is going to give me a number. That is the integer version of C. So whatever that number is, I'm going to add 13 to it. So right here is my Unicode value of C plus 13. Then I'm going to mod that by 26 to get me a value. Then I'll add that value onto a base value of 65. Go ahead.
So, okay, so 65 came from, that's what A was?
Yeah, that's A on the Unicode table.
So I guess, how does the mod 26 still work? I guess if you have more values.
Okay, so good point. So if this guy, so let's assume this is an A. We want to get an N from it, right? So if our C is currently an A, we're going to get a 65. Actually, let's do the, well, this will work for the A too. So we'll say 65 is our A. So right now we're saying 65 plus 13 is 78. 78. How many times does 26 go into 78? Two times. So that is 52 to 78 is what?
Wait.
So that's 26 times 2 is 52. 65 minus 52 is a 13. So 65 plus 13 is a, I guess that would be 78, which is the map. So this is my starting point, 65. The base, so this guy boils down to a 78. 78 mod 26 is equal to a 13.
Okay.
26 goes into 78 2 times with a remainder of 13.
So it works because you're modding before you add.
Correct. Yeah. Similarly, if we started with a Q, I don't remember what Q started as. Let me just, we'll show that it works here with real quick since we're out of time. I'll just change this to my ROT 13 version 4. Get rid of this guy. So there's my A. Did I not return it? I should have returned it. I'm probably missing a set of parentheses. But in any case, this will take that base number 65, add to it all this stuff. Okay, yeah, I'm missing a set of parentheses. That should now do it. So this will give you that number plus 13, mod that by 26. So as you just said, we need to do the mod before we add. Then we do the add, 65 plus, convert that to a char, which gives me the actual character version of that. Return that for my ROT 13.4. And that is what we will use up here is our ROT 13_4. Why? So it is mapping it. It's just mapping it to the same thing.
Yeah.
Plus 13 mod 26. We'll look at it in the first minute next class. We're just doing some stupid math in here. This works. Well, something very similar to this will work for doing our mapping. So we can get it down to one line. We just have to do the correct crazy stuff in here. But I'll go ahead and I'll push this up to GitHub so you have the current version of our code. And I will, no homework over the weekend, but we do have the hackathon. So make sure you check your teams on the hackathon. I'll send out some information later on today. 8 a.m. on Saturday morning here in the CS area. If you did not sign up for it, make sure you start working on the penalty assignment.
You get lunch? What? You get lunch?
Maybe.
It's a Thanksgiving Thanksgiving dinner lunch thing. So they have like the whole Thanksgiving stuff, turkey and all that jazz.